Hier ist der Antritt, der Fahrradpodcast auf detektor.fm mit der ersten Ausgabe im August 2024. Mein Name ist Gerolf Meyer.
Ich bin Christian Bollert und es ist absolut richtig. Es ist August, es war in den vergangenen Wochen durchaus warm. Ich freue mich, dass es endlich mal wieder soweit ist, dass wir hier einen kleinen, aber feinen Podcast liefern. Und diesmal ist es auch ein bisschen anders und gleichzeitig kommen wir auch ein bisschen zurück. Es ist verrückt irgendwie diesen Monat.
Das ist ein bisschen speziell, wie das so ist. Da kommen viele Sachen zusammen. Temperaturen, Urlaube, Verhinderungen,
Eurobike,
alles.
Aber auch eine ganz besondere Gesprächspartnerin. Das, glaube ich, kann man an dieser Stelle sagen.
Ja, soll ich sagen, wer es ist?
Ja, los, komm.
Ja, also Jacquie Phelan. Christian, ich habe dir zur Eurobike, glaube ich, gesagt, dass wir sie kurz dort treffen werden. Ne? Konntest du dich noch daran erinnern, wer das ist?
Ja, ich konnte mich noch daran erinnern, auch an dein Gespräch mit ihr und so, also dass wir nicht zum ersten Mal im Podcast mit ihr reden und so, also ja.
Okay, also ich habe nochmal mit ihr gesprochen. Ich kann es kurz sagen, wie es dazu kam. Jacquie ist zur Eurobike gekommen, ist dort quasi eingeflogen worden aus Kalifornien. Sie ist eine der ersten Frauen auf dem Mountainbike. Also da gibt es nur wenige, die da noch früher dabei waren. Sie ist eine der ersten Rennfahrerinnen.
Man kann vielleicht so weit gehen und sagen, eine der Miterfinderinnen des Mountainbikes.
Naja, in der Anwendung.
Ja. So, oder sagen wir so, genau ja. Im Mountainbike-Sport.
Genau. Ja. Und sie hat viel gewonnen und ist verheiratet mit einem Erfinder, ist wahrscheinlich untertrieben, Charlie Cunningham, der Mountainbikes gebaut hat, muss man sagen. Und Jacquie wurde zur Eurobike eingeladen, um darüber zu sprechen, was das Gravelbike heute mit dem Mountainbike damals zu tun hat. Und ich habe das mitbekommen, dass sie dahin kommt, und da ich die beiden auch schon mal besucht hatte vor einer gewissen Zeit, da ich ja auch kurz von erzählt hatte, da gab es mal so eine Nerd-Spezialausgabe mit einem anderen Charlie, mit Charlie Kelly im Museum in Fairfax. Da habe ich gesagt, Mensch Jacquie, super, dass wir uns sehen, komm her, wir müssen unbedingt essen gehen, und wie lange bist du eigentlich da? Und Jacquie schrieb mir, ja, ich bin 3 Monate in Europa, aber eigentlich habe ich nicht so richtig eine Ahnung, wie ich das machen soll. Ich will irgendwie Couchsurfen, aber naja. Und dann habe ich mir gedacht, okay.
Gibst du Starthilfe?
Gebe ich Starthilfe, weil die haben mir auch schon mal geholfen oder mehrmals. Die waren immer irgendwie im Podcast, und wie das dann so ist, da hilft man sich gegenseitig. Genau, und gerade auch Jacquies 68 ist ja hergekommen und wusste nicht so richtig, wie sie in Deutschland starten sollte. Und deswegen habe ich sie zu einem guten Freund ins Sauerland gebracht. Wir sind durch den Wald gefahren, haben im Wald geschlafen, und der ist ungefähr bei ihrem nächsten Ziel gewesen, und dort wurden dann noch so ein paar organisatorische Dinge erstmal erledigt, die man dann vielleicht mal hat, wenn man irgendwie hier unterwegs ist, wie eine SIM-Karte und sowas. Genau. Und in der Küche...
Hatte sie überhaupt ein Fahrrad dabei?
Sie hatte ein Fahrrad dabei.
Ja, das ist doch schon mal gut.
Ja. Sie hatte ein Fahrrad dabei, ein Breezer, über den mal irgendwie ein Truck so halb drüber gefahren ist, der dann inzwischen schon geflickt wurde. Und und auch so Schlafsack und so, das war alles am Start. Wir sind jedenfalls zusammen ins Sauerland gefahren mit Zug und Rad, und in der Küche meines Freundes Thilo im Sauerland haben wir das folgende Gespräch aufgenommen.
Und das muss man vielleicht, bevor ihr es jetzt hört, sagen, natürlich komplett in Englisch gehalten ist. Das heißt, wir gehen davon aus, dass ihr das versteht und hoffen, dass ihr das versteht, haben aber auch entschieden, aufgrund der Verständlichkeit und Gesamtsituation, das auch im Original sozusagen euch zur Verfügung zu stellen. Dementsprechend der Hinweis kommt an dieser Stelle. Ihr solltet schon logischerweise Englisch verstehen können, wenn ihr euch für dieses Interview interessiert.
Und wir haben aber auch die Erfahrung gemacht, ne? Wir haben es beim letzten Mal, hatten wir gefragt, wie unsere Hörerinnen und Hörer dazu stehen, und dann hatten wir eigentlich nur Feedback bekommen, dass das okay so ist.
Ja, es gab
einmal, an einer Stelle haben wir ein bisschen erklärt, warum wir das machen.
Genau.
Jedenfalls 99% Englisch. Wir sprechen auch ein ganz kleines bisschen Deutsch, und es geht natürlich um Mountainbike-Geschichte, und mich hat besonders auch interessiert die Geschichte von Jacquie und Charlie.
Hören wir mal rein.
We are sitting in a kitchen right in beautiful Sauerland. We just left Eurobike 2 days ago, took the train, rode our bikes, slept in the woods for 2 nights, and now I'm sitting here in the kitchen with Jacquie Phelan. Hello, Jacquie.
Hey there. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here, and maybe there are people who don't know you. Jacquie Phelan, who are you?
Well, I'm a 68-year-old mountain bike racer. who's in Europe to do the single speed world championships in Alpha now. Looking forward to that. But I was invited by a couple of cool people to come speak at Eurobike trade show. So that's what I did for the last 4 days. Practiced German and made stories about the early days of mountain biking.
Okay, I want to get to understand those early days of mountain biking a little better, and I want to get to know the story of Jacquie Phelan and Charlie Cunningham, because I've been hearing the name Charlie Cunningham in the last days quite a few times. So, how and when did you get into mountain biking?
It started in 1978 when my friend Daryl Scrabach rode around San Francisco with me. He saw me riding in traffic and just went, wow, what a babe. I wonder why she's wearing a toy duck on her big fat helmet. And when I met him, he said, have you thought of racing? It took me a half an hour to catch you in traffic. I go, racing? No, I was working as a nanny in San Francisco. So he took me to my first race in 1980. We rode around a lot before we did my first race, and I did damn well in that first race. I won it. It was a hill climb, mass start hill climb, up a hill behind San Francisco. And so winning a race at age 25, this is 1980 or 81, dramatically shifted my life direction because I was still attempting to complete courses so that I could apply to medical school and be a doctor. And it ended up not working out. I'm not really terrible at chemistry and physics, pretty good at biology. So anyway, my life veered suddenly way off into left field, built around bicycles and racing on the road because women had just been allowed to race in the Olympic road race in 3 years down the line in Los Angeles.
It sounds like there must have been a pretty big force if it made you veer into the left field, as you said. What was that force for you that made you change life direction?
Is your audience near a chair? I grew up in a very violent family, and my mother shot my father in the head, but did not kill him. And then he did not press charges, legal charges, so Mom didn't have to go to jail. She just took care of him. By the way, he was a psychoanalyst, and she was a nurse. They were middle-class people, but with terrible drug habits, which is why Mom got a gun and did that crazy thing. And there's 6 kids in my family. I'm the oldest one. I probably would have been expected to deal with the issues surrounding an incarcerated mother and 5 dependent siblings if she had killed him, because the police since she didn't kill him, they couldn't do anything about it because he didn't complain. And in those days, the marital status was sort of sovereign. It wasn't, the state couldn't interfere. If the victim didn't press charges, then they're like, okay, that's how you're going to live your life. But I just decided that this is ridiculous and I don't want to be in that family. So I went into cycling partly as a great way to get my mind off of this kind of tumult. I wasn't interested in dealing with the aftermath, and my siblings all suffered way, way more than me from this. I was 25. And then it was my sister was 24, brother 23, 22, 20, and then the youngest was 15, and he had to clean the brains off the wall. So this explosion of the family unit shot me into like a billiard ball off into the left pocket, and I certainly didn't have to look back because I wasn't interested in maintaining much contact with this messed up family, although I did. But the kids had been, since it was 25 years of violence and dysfunction, the kids did not hold together the way in a healthy family they might to survive what was going on in the older generation. So I had a new family all of a sudden. It was the bicycle world. And Daryl was one of those people who saw me in traffic and just said, hey, you should race. And by the way, can we date? And I was like, dude, you're 20 years older than I am. I don't think so. But I mean, I didn't say it in actual words. It was just obvious that I was not attracted to but he was a very dear person, and he was a friend of mine for the rest of our lives. And he took me on 100-mile rides, big-ass rides. And a different friend, a guy who owned a bike shop, took me on my road bike, Peugeot PX10, up Mount Tam on the dirt We went to the summit of Tam and then rode our road bikes down on the pavement because it's not quite so pleasant to bounce down dirt road on a skinny tire bike. So that was probably my very first mountain bike ride. And that was probably before I met Daryl.
So Mount Tam, for our listeners to understand and for me to understand, is the famous Mount Tamalpais, which is in the Breezer logo, which is kind of one of the mecca of mountain biking. That's where that famous repeg race took place on the slopes of Mount Tam, right?
Well, actually another little range, a subsidiary range.
Okay.
Much closer to Fairfax.
Okay, and that's all north of San Francisco.
Right.
So you somehow got pulled into cycling, if I understood you right, from first riding your bike for transportation. You've been
a bike.
You've been a cycling commuter
my whole life.
Yeah.
Since I learned at age 9. And San Francisco has hills, so you develop great big legs because you have to go over the hills. And that put me in a good place for racing.
And then you became a road cyclist, a road racer. And then somehow, you already mentioned Mount Tam, you must have turned into a mountain bike racer because you're famous for, or you're known for
mountain biking, right?
Mountain biking, mountain bike racing. What happened?
Well, that was also because I was not a conforming road rider. The road riders have to look a certain way. They have to have a clean outfit. It's preferable if you shave your legs. And none of those, I didn't check any of those boxes. I didn't have a lot of money. I was riding a bike that was way too big for me because my childhood or my teenage Peugeot PX10 was 23 inches, which you're going to have to calculate whatever the centimeters are, but it was the wrong size. The bike shop just sold me the wrong bloody bike, but I didn't know. And so I was racing at national level within 2 months of starting my first race in January 1981. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to back up because my friend Daryl took me on a ride in November 1980 where I rode my Raleigh Girls 5-speed Sprite from the city to Fairfax and up and around a very hard 20-mile dirt loop called the Appetite Seminar, which is named that because you work up an appetite for the annual Thanksgiving dinner, which is an American ritual. So, and then I rode home again. So that was a big 75-mile day. It got the attention of all the mountain bikers in Marin because me and Daryl were the only Ausländer at that ride, and we were also the only people with helmets on, and we were the only ones with skinny tires and the wrong bike. So skipping back up to trying to get into the Olympics, just being too old to be coachable and, hairy legs and all that shit, and a kind of an attitude about why I'm riding. I rode for joy. It wasn't a job. And a lot of the girls who were much younger were, they were just dying to get in the Olympics and willing to do almost anything, which when you're dealing with women athletes means that they might have to keep the men coaches happy. And that was another thing that I was absolutely not interested in doing. So I ended up doing, in the end of that season, 81, I went to the national championships. I did well in the time trial, crashed in the road race, and decided that maybe mountain biking should be my future. It was during that summer that I was going with Gary Fisher. He remembered that I was on the Appetite Seminar in spring of 81, and it said, weren't you the one that was on like this old girl's bike? And yeah, that was me. I mean, hey, there were only 2 other women on the ride. There were 50 people riding, and some women stuck out. So we rode together. I was on my Peugeot. And when we parted ways, him towards San Anselmo and me back towards the city, he gave me his phone number, and I rang him up 2 days later. We went on a ride and fell in love and rode and trained with the men on the road, huge miles. And so I got in great shape, and this is like my 3rd, 4th, 5th month of being a racer, having a racing license, and doing very well, winning any race, the road race that finished with a hill. But if it was a criterium, I might be crashing because I didn't have the chops to ride in a peloton. I certainly didn't have tactics available, but Gary would be standing on the side at a criterium and yell at me to what to do this lap, what to do that lap. And that's actually kind of funny because it was a pretty big stage race for women in May. And I won the 2 time trials and I forget what place I got in I I sort of won the road race, which had 2 miles of dirt in it. And I was on my road bike and I crashed, bent the fork. Gary happened to be following me. The whole rest of the group were 2 minutes behind me. He throws me his bike and says, ride this. I couldn't reach the pedals, so I had to stand and ride to the finish line. Then in come the other women, and they put up a huge protest because I had unfair support. So they...
Unfair support in having the other bike?
Having Gary tossing me a bike when none of them had someone to give them a bike. The follow van, which follows the racers, was behind them, and it only had spare wheels. So I would have had to wait. Well, they didn't have spare forks in the follow van. So the protest went on. The administrators said, okay, we're going to add 5 minutes to your time. Gary said, take the punishment. You're going to do fine. Relax. And they'll feel better because you got punished. And so I made up the time in the other races, in the stage race and the time trial and stuff. And in the crit, which was, 6 corners. I'm really bad at crits. Anyway, every 5 laps, there'd be a preem lap for a prize and for points. So he had me go extra fast on the 4th lap and the 9th lap and the 14th lap, like the lap before the preem. And I would gun it, and all the other women were, why is she going fast on this lap? And it was because I could stay away for the whole lap. I was so damn strong, it didn't matter that I wasn't with a bunch of people. So then when they realized she's going to win the preem. So then they'd organize, and somebody would come past me, but I was always second or third, so that got me points, no preem. And all those points added up, so I won the whole stage race. And I also coincidentally met Tom Ritchie because, see, I had to finish the race on a repaired fork. Gary took me up to his business partner's house up in La Honda and had me unbend the fork. And meanwhile, the Tour de France is happening, and I go, what's that? And they go, oh, it's a 25-day race in France that's, the whole city, the whole country. And I go, God, I can't wait to do it. And Tom just says, no woman is ever going to do the Tour de France. And I said, well, they haven't met Jacquie Phelan. She just warms up after 40 miles. Women weren't allowed to race more than 40 miles in those days. That was a limit. Just like with juniors having limited gears, women were considered too weak to have real long distances. So I immediately realized that Tom Ritchie's kind of a conservative guy, and about 2 years later, they had the first Tour de France Féminin, and Tom Ritchie's mountain bike racer, went to it because she was good enough on the road to go to the Tour de France Féminin, and disappointed Tom terribly. Anyway, so now it's 81, and I'm done with Gary because after that National Points Series race, I decided I wanted to stay on the East Coast because he had thrown out my journal, my diary, and I didn't feel like going back to live with him in Marin County. I was going to hang out on the East Coast where I went to college and had a good time doing that. Won the New England Road Championships, and the prize was a custom-built bike.
Our listeners already now know Gary for sure. Like you've been training with him, you've been together, but then came a certain Charlie. How did you get to know Charlie? We know it's Charlie Cunningham. How did you get to know him?
Gary needed to buy a brake, one of Charlie's custom brakes, for $500, which was an unbelievable amount of money, but they were the best things available because there was no such thing as mountain bike brakes back in those days. And so I went with him, and I saw what a cute guy was selling the brakes. And then we borrowed a mountain bike for a ride because I didn't have a mountain bike at the time. So Charlie lent me his little bobtail, which is a 26 in the front and 20 in the back mountain bike, kind of a strange one. So I rode that around. It was great to have bike to ride and keep up with Gary because I certainly couldn't do it with my Raleigh girls Sprite. So the introduction came because it's a small bike world in Marin County. There were probably only 50 people that rode fat tires, clunkers. And I just went, yeah, that Charlie guy seems really nice. So when I came back and Gary had thrown all my stuff out of the apartment, I moved back to the city to continue being a nanny and wanted to do what me and Gary used to do, which is climb Tam at night and bomb down by moonlight. So I called up Charlie, he was in the phone book, and said, could I stay at your house in Fairfax? I'd really love to do a moonlight ride and have a picnic for people up on the summit. So he came up from Fairfax, and my friends drove me and my Raleigh girls' bike and all the food that I'd cooked and the wine. And we had a great party, and Charlie brought a friend with him who had one of his bikes. And this is like the first couple of years Charlie was making bikes for more than just himself.
That's what I wanted to ask you. You said his bikes, but it's not like a bike he just owned. He made the bikes himself.
He cut the tubes. He welded the tubes.
Tell me about the bikes he built back then.
They were made of a strange material called aluminum, which had never been used for mountain bikes and had barely been used for road bikes. A guy named Gary Klein made road bikes out of aluminum, and Charlie was going to buy one. And on his way to buy the Klein, he decided, I'm going to take my $1,000 and buy a welding setup and learn how to weld. And he had a background in aeronautical engineering, so he had pretty decent building, the skills to tackle a material that's a little more complex to play with than steel is. And he made mistakes, but he finally figured out how to make a good bike that would that looked good and felt good, which was not at all like the clunkers with their long wheelbases, or even the breezers, which were modeled after the clunkers. He modeled his after, a combination of what he liked and his mom's road bike, much shorter, a bunch of other things that he put into place, which now, since that bike sits in the museum, you can see as a modern mountain bike 10 or 15 years before the modern mountain bike was made in mass quantities.
Are there one or two or three details of that mountain bike which make it a modern mountain bike as you describe it?
Right. Well, sloping top tube for one, great big tubing, lightweight, heat-treated tubing so that it wasn't thick-walled like Gary Klein's, drop bars that were flared, single front chainring, hubs that were wider by a lot, front and rear, custom brakes that he invented, inline cable adjusters so that you didn't have to carry a tool shop with you when your brake pads wore down. And in those days, the brake pads wore down very fast because they had not perfected the compounds for brake pads. He contributed to the knowledge about better brake pads. He really loved working with other engineers, and sometimes he got paid for that kind of thing. So trying to think of the quick release for the saddle. He kept his pump inside the seat tube, so you didn't have to remember to bring a pump on your rides. I can't get much farther than that. I guess the cap on the stem. The Cinelli stem was like a closed fist, and you had to take off everything on one side in order to pull the Lenka out of the stem. And he just said, well, why can't we just get direct access to the stem by having it be two parts, a little cap and the rest of the stem?
That's a handful of stuff, and it makes me think not only of mountain bikes. I mean, sloping top tube, single chainring, wider hubs, quick release, makes me think of mountain bikes. Although today they don't have quick releases on the saddle anymore, but because they have seat posts, you can adjust the height, but the effect is the same as a seat post. You can
keep your pump inside the seat.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, yeah. Well, you can store your pump in other parts of the frame today, but it reminds me of mountain bikes. But especially the drop bars, for example, reminds me of gravel bikes nowadays as well.
They're called gravel.
They're called gravel.
Right.
Yeah.
The modern gravel bike is the old Charlie Cunningham bike.
Oh, okay. Haven't you heard the story of the gravel bike, which has been invented only a few years ago?
Yeah, and I had a good laugh.
Okay. So there was this guy, Charlie Cunningham, and you wanted to do the moonlight ride, and he was building not only aluminum frames, but all those other parts you mentioned. May I ask you how you fell in love?
Well, he has a beautiful aura about him. He's not macho. He's at peace with himself and his role in the world, and that's extremely attractive. Plus, he's about 3 times smarter than I am, and I knew that I wanted to have somebody that was brilliant to match my own genius, or even overtop it. And then the final thing was when I met his parents, they loved him to death. And so he came from a very happy family. And I thought, this is a threefer, and I'm keeping him.
A threefer means like
parents, mom, dad, and Charlie. I got 3 people
okay, I see.
to be in love with who would look after me for the rest of my life, which is still happening. And it was great. And it was an interesting falling in love because it wasn't like the sudden boom that you get where you just want to fuck the person. And that sort of happened with Fisher. And part of the reason is because he's more like my dad, and everybody knows that people often want their very own version of their parents to be connected with, because that's what you call love. And with Charlie, there wasn't that biochemical boom at all. It was a pleasant feeling, but not like intense. And I thought, well, I'm going to grow into this. And it did. It didn't take very long. It took less than a year to totally love Charlie. It didn't hit me in the gut the way sometimes the poorer choices do. Are any of your listeners still following any of this? I know I talk too fast.
No, I think it's fine. I'm listening. So I guess other people will listen too.
But they don't get to hear what great German I speak.
Yeah, you could.
By the way, I speak some German.
Yeah. At the end of this talk, we might give them a taste of your German, of your amazingly,
nothing like your English.
How did you live your life together? Like, I know that you've been racing. I know that he's been building bikes. So how was that Cunningham, Phelan dynamic?
Well, he's shy and polite and loves work. And I'm not shy. And I hate work. And I am loud. I'm sort of the diametric opposite in terms of affect of Charlie. I'm social and silly, and he's good at being silly too, but he was very not social. He had what is now known as social anxiety. In short, his battery got drained when he was around people, and if it was more than one person, his battery drained out real fast. And mine is charged by being with people. It's kind of a conflict of interest, but it served well in promoting the bicycle that I was racing and beating almost all the men, and of course the women, the 3 other women.
What kind of bicycle did you race, and where did you race it?
I was racing in California mostly, and I was riding on a Cunningham drop bar bike that weighed about 5 kilograms less than any other bike in the 650-person race. And we all started together, which was incredibly fun, a little chaotic, but that way it was easy to time. They would just give you your time when you crossed the line, and they didn't have to do a lot of fancy computer work, but it did take about 2 hours to get your results. And so people would hang out and drink beer at the finish line and tell stories until they saw how they did precisely.
And I hear that you've also been racing in Europe.
Right. Well, Europe began after my 6.5-year winning streak, where I won all the races in the women's category. And I actually got...
You won all the races in the women's category?
Yeah, for 6.5 years, from 81 to 86. And then in around 86, I had been racing on the Wilderness Trail Bikes team. I forgot to tell your listeners that Charlie founded a business called Wilderness Trail Bikes, which promoted the tires he designed, the brakes that he patented, and it was probably the first mountain bike manufacturing business, a little boutique business in Mill Valley. And I was on the team until the guys decided that they were sick of me being loud and show-offy, and so they kicked me off the team. And Charlie, we decided to just have a Cunningham team with 1 or 2 other fellows who would drive me to the races, because I'm afraid to drive a car. And we had simple white jerseys that just said Cunningham in Helvetica print, just like is on his logo on the top tube of the bike. And getting kicked off the team seemed to precipitate a 2-year-long depression that made me very weak. I think it might have been called Epstein-Barr or some kind of weird autoimmune thing, but I was very tired all the time. And so that's when I started the Women's Mountain Bike and Tea Society, because since I couldn't go fast, I might as well profit from going the speed that your average mortal goes and turn a bunch of women who've been discouraged to try this dangerous sport into trying what I think of as a safe and easy and fun thing. And we would go have tea and eat pastry in the woods and gossip. And I would hop off my bike and walk for whoever was the slowest. That's usually who I rode with. And word got around that this chick, of course, they didn't know who I was as a racer. There was like no connection between my wombat life and my racing life, unless the woman's husband had raced me before.
And we need to tell the listeners that WOMBAT
is an acronym for Women's Mountain Bike and Tea Society.
So tell us about the typical WOMBAT's meeting, ride, however you called it. What would happen if I would have turned up? Maybe you wouldn't have accepted me, but
no, if you had fake braids, you would have been fine. I would usually bring a big thermos and a bunch of plastic Milmac cups, and a local bakery provided cheese Danish, day-old free cheese Danish. So I had a huge pink box of delicious pastry, and his name was Fred Heitman, and it was bread and chocolate bakery. And you know how women are like worried about their weight and all that stuff. I feel like if you're on your bike, you can't really be too concerned because you need the energy. So we'd ride or push and walk into the woods and break out the tea party, and then get on our bikes and get home without crashing or as they say, giving blood, because women are already giving blood every month. We don't need to give more blood, and we definitely don't need to go to the emergency room. So my whole message was fun, safety among women, get away from the patriarchy or the oppressive people, men in your life or whatever. And there are plenty of people that run away from their problems. Instead of drinking, they just ride their bike a lot. And that's a relatively healthy way to grapple with life problems.
And you also mentioned that you had this huge family drama and you started to ride your bike. So there seems to be something to it.
Well, I was already riding my bike. I started to ride it a lot harder.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, like this.
There was this new nuclear source, which was fury. And fury is a really powerful energy source. And if you scratch the Olympic champions, you're going to find a lot of dysfunctional families. It's pretty normal, actually.
And this kind of wombat meeting ride where women rode together without any men, and where they would enjoy riding, but also would enjoy sitting around talking, drinking tea, all that kind of stuff.
And learning how to do something that's complex.
Okay, you mean like the riding?
Yeah, how technically to navigate without getting hurt.
Yeah, and my question would have been, was that something that was new, that was unheard of?
Well, certainly teaching bike skills wasn't really done, although I do remember somebody in Florida had a road racing camp, and that was probably learning Peloton skills and tactics. But people would, some of the guys would just say, you're actually teaching people to ride? Everybody knows how to ride a bike. And I just said, well, actually, yeah, they are paying me, and they're learning, and so I'm just going to keep it up even though everybody knows how to ride a bike. Because off-road has particular issues, riding over a field of rocks, doing a hairpin turn, standing on the pedals without putting your foot down for 2 or 3 seconds and without crashing. There's and then picking a good line, or how to brake without stopping the front wheel and flipping. There's about 10 different skills that I taught in a sort of a school fashion, one after the other, including like riding over a shipping pallet, which is a big square thing with timber, and it's about that tall.
I guess that's what we know as Europalette. Yeah, where they ship stuff on. They put stuff on, wrap it in plastic, and then they ship it on those things.
Well, this is only that big, and you can ride your bike over it. And you can do it without lifting the front wheel. If you go just enough fast, you can bash over the shipping pallets, which there were plenty of behind our post office. So women could learn to just trust themselves that if they had the right speed, that they could get over obstacles without a lot of skill. And then I would teach them the skill of lofting the front wheel just a little so it was unweighted, and then they could be on top of the shipping pallet and then transfer their weight quickly to the front so that the back wheel didn't smash its rim. And then they'd end up sort of floating up and over and down. And that was like, intermediate skill. And of course, everybody's overjoyed that they figure out how to do that. And then I gave diplomas. So all like 5,000 or 6,000 women who've passed through my Schule, which was called Instant Finesse. It was Jackie's Wombat's Instant Finesse Clinic. And the diploma had these three initials, BFD, big B, little f, big D. And in American Umgangssprache, that means big fucking deal. But it could mean Bike Laureate of Finesse degree. And it was designed by a graphic designer to look just like a real diploma. So they could put BFD after all their other professional indications. So you can string it out, put it on your resume and all that stuff. Because there's a part of me that really loves teaching, loves showing off, wants everybody else to be able to show off and run off and teach their friends what they learned. Because that's how you really learn, is if you share what you learned with others. And that was my way of growing the women's field, not for racing, but just to enjoy bikes. So this word of mouth thing, it did spread. And there were chapters, maybe 10 cities, with people much more able to do administration than me. Getting women on rides, doing it every week. Yeah, there were some subtleties like insurance that I had to figure out how to deal with that, because you can not do anything in the US without having some kind of insurance. But I figured that out.
Getting back to Charlie, you mentioned a company called Wilderness Trail Bikes, which he founded. This brand is around until today. People know it, but I guess there's a need to clarify that he's not with the brand anymore, right?
That's right. In the year 2000, after having allowed a lawyer into their partnership, not with any legal contracts, but he just found his way into the other three's lives, and he took over. And that since the other three guys, Charlie, Steve, and Mark, were unsophisticated, they let him do it. And he did some good things. He was able to get Specialized to pay royalties on tires fabricated in Europe, which they were not paying for a year or two, because there's no way Charlie could know what, or anybody knew what was being sold. And, and in business, if there's any way you can save some money, you're going to do it, regardless of how morally correct it is. So this guy, his name is Patrick Seidler, wormed his way in, and Mark Slate, the one partner that didn't make anything. Steve Potts made bikes. Charlie made bikes and was an inventor. Slate he ran around and did, he was like a gopher. And his girlfriend, or his wife, was the bookkeeper. So he and his wife had the handle on the financial aspect of Wilderness Trail Bikes, which is not great. Charlie had his head down working, so he didn't know. Steve Potts is an imbecile, so he couldn't know. And then when Patrick came along, the wife got fired from her job as a bookkeeper, and Patrick took over. He was a lawyer that specialized in accounting, creative accounting. That means double book accounting, where you have one public knowledge of what books, the money, finances, and then your private, what's really going on. Anyway, so he and Mark together took away the business from Charlie and Steve, and it took a year for them to wrangle it away, and it was a terrible year, the year 2000. So Charlie then was free to do whatever he wanted. They certainly didn't pay anything for their share, Charlie and Steve's share of the business. They were robbed. Charlie became an independent engineer for projects that involved aeronautical stuff.
And what happened to the Cunningham brand, like the Cunningham brand for bikes?
Well, he could resume making bikes. Not that he particularly wanted to, because he couldn't earn a lot of money. So for the 10 years he was slaving away for Wilderness Trail Bikes, he was not building any bikes. He had a long period of no bike building because he threw his whole heart and soul into Wilderness Trail Bikes. And then when he was not in WTB, he had to earn money and do outside inventing for individuals. And he didn't pay himself very much for that. But he was meticulous, and I still have his timesheets for various projects for the people that wanted his work. And I'm keeping him because it just shows just how much care he put into charging very little. And, 10 minutes here, 3 minutes there, no charge for this, no charge for that. That was NC, and it's 3 pages long or more. And it's intense for me, or sad, because he worked so hard. And a part of the reason he didn't charge a lot, like at first it was $20 an hour, and then I begged him to please get it up to $40. He said, I don't want to be owned by rich people. If I charge $100 or $200 an hour, which is, the rate for an engineer, the people would think they owned me, and I don't want to be owned. So, that makes sense. You get to pick exactly who you're willing to work for. So he had a different take on the whole issue of money.
And then, as well, I guess quite some people know, there has been an accident.
Yeah. Charlie had been talked into building 5 bikes for 5 rich guys. And I guess he made a 6th one for me. And in 2015 was just working on the fork, put down his work and went for a ride, a quick little 45-minute ride out of our house and around a nice twisty road, which has a lot of deer that jump across the road. And he probably hit one of the deer on August 3rd, 2015, and hit and broke 8 bones and had a concussion. He went to the hospital and was sent home to heal all those broken bones. And the brain damage wasn't immediately obvious for 7 weeks. And then he had a brain bleed. He was rushed to the hospital, and I wasn't home, so I called the hospital, which was 60 miles away, and they said, we give you a choice between taking steroids, medication, or drilling open the cranium. That's called a craniotomy. And Charlie and I agreed that we would choose the drugs because we were terrified of what that drilling meant. But it was the thing that would have saved his life. So we chose the wrong thing. And he came home, and I was given the okay for going to a single speed race in Japan, and was on my way there at a stopover in Hawaii when I learned that he had another brain bleed, turned down the requests for CAT scans, even though they already knew that he'd had this terrible brain bleed. And he turned it down because he'd had some radio, whatever you call it, x-rays on his face when he was a child. So he never let dentists do x-rays. He didn't want any more rays added to his body. And if I had been there, I would have overridden it and said, take another picture, please. But he was there alone in the ER emergency room for 7 hours until he more or less died. And then they had to rush him to a nearer hospital because the brain hospital that he was at was 60 miles away. So he had emergency brain surgery. I heard about it in Hawaii, came home. He was hooked up to all the machines. He lost the ability to read. He lost his ability to navigate in the world. He didn't have any sense of direction anymore. He lost most of his sight, and he lost all of his superpowers. He had to be taught how to swallow and walk and do everything. And so then the next 9 years, it's been 9 years this August, he was on a new adventure. Not a genius, not a physically gifted rider, but a helpless guy whose wife needed to do all the work because in the United States, you don't get state help for any of that shit. So I had a new life being a mom or a caregiver, and he had to learn to accept help. So that was it's kind of a strange fairy tale ending. The guy who was always independent and did everything for himself, whether it was building houses, bikes, repairing toilets, or putting in electrical, he did it all. He never let anybody else do any of that shit. And the gal who never wanted any responsibility or any children suddenly had her hands full.
And I know that he's in care. I don't know if it's the right word.
Yeah, a Pflegeheim.
And you're paying quite some money for that. Money which is, you need support, right?
I've been asking for it ever since the accident. A friend of mine said, you need to make a GoFundMe. I'll do it for you. Let's just set it up. People will push a button and donate. And so within the first week, we raised $10,000 or 20, and it's gone on and on. It's probably a record-winning campaign because it's never going to stop. We're not going to, every time we get close to the goal of 100,000, I just move the goal to 200,000.
because you need another 100,000 for the next year.
For the rest of his life.
Yeah.
We don't have that kind of care in the U.S., so it's up to individuals to raise the money or sell everything they have. And I'm still dragging my feet about selling our house. I'm not going to do that. Because there needs to be something for me when I'm fucked up and in care.
So how can people find this GoFundMe campaign?
Well, they just type in Charlie Cunningham and it's in there. Thank you for asking. That's really nice. That's part of the commercial aspect to our podcast.
No, not really.
I'm kidding.
That's part of your life, and that's part of your relationship. This podcast is about Charlie Cunningham, Jacquie Phelan, and their life together, and that's part of, as far as I understand it, it's part of your life.
It's true, and also your podcast is part of the vast web of communication in the family known as people who ride bicycles, for everything from racing to commuting to mental health to transportation, spiritual, whatever. And it's a very tightly woven subculture underneath the car culture, underneath the capitalist culture. It manages to be strong and flexible at the same time, and it has been very supportive for Charlie and me. And for that, I thank you.
I'm happy to take part in that support. You're at Eurobike this year. Like Charlie's in care, and you're here. What's your impression of Eurobike?
Well, it's let's just say that my rights was überflutet. I was overwhelmed. It's two huge pavilions. I ended up hanging out more at the little hand-built micro pavilion because that's what I can relate to, people who build bikes by hand. But there was the Schwalbe booth, and they were very helpful because they gave me a couple of tires. My tires on the touring bike that I'm going to ride is completely shot, so thank you, Schwalbe. I met a lot of people. I got a chance to talk, and actually that was the reason for being there, is to flesh out a little of the history of mountain biking as it pertains to this new thing called gravel. They're not identical, and so I threw up a few pictures on the wall and talked about them.
I would like to know one thing about the current bike scene as you are experiencing it. One thing you like about it and one thing you don't like. And maybe you start with the one you don't like.
That's a darn interesting question. Well, my pet peeve is it still seems like a boys' club. No matter how hard women fight to be included at the table, we don't seem to have equal time at the table. And that was partly why I created this women's scene away from the table, so that I could be in charge and not have it be about racing, because I was very interested in not having it be about racing. It was about goofing off and having a good time, and then maybe using a bike for personal transportation when your car is in the shop, some practical stuff. And so the seeming unfairness of it still being a boys' club and women really don't get equal prize money in racing. There's seldom the same number of women athletes in the bike races at the Olympics. For the first few years they had cycling, it would be like 60 women and 350 men in these Olympic races. That's not fair. So the unfairness was a bug for me. So one of the things I like is everybody on two wheels, even if it's an electric bike, we're getting around in the world as vulnerable moving units. Compared to cars, we're doing a little bit less harm to the planet in general. And since most people's lives are enacted within 5 or 10K of their home, bicycles, and maybe especially electric bikes, could solve that without us having to pollute our overstrained planet. I guess the other thing I really love is just this the family aspect of bicycling, because and I'm an old woman, and I'm happy to know that all the younger women doing it, of course they do a different thing than I did. I watched a few times mountain bike races, and I'm like, I don't think I ever did that. I can't believe I did what they're doing, because it's evolved so much. It's gotten so fast, so dangerous, so technical. I don't know if I were their age and do the modern, because they also have to be adept at social media and be willing to be marketed as a commercial commercial spokesperson. And I knew when I was doing it, I wasn't going to ever wear an automotive logo on my jersey. I refuse to support petroleum or cars. So that means that I might be off the back if I were racing at the same, because I know I'd still be a standout because I was physically very gifted. Does that answer enough of your question?
Yeah, it does. I think it gives us an impression. And now to finish this, we still need to, we can tell this to the listeners. We've been spending the last days together. We've been seeing each other at Eurobike, and then we've been taking the train, riding our bikes, sleeping outside in the woods for 2 nights, and meeting a friend here in Sauerland. And you have a damn good German. And you mentioned this, so now you have to prove it. Please give me one of those words you learned on that trip.
One word, no way.
Maybe you have more.
Es wäre nett, ob ich sagen könnte, dass du hast mich demonstriert. Also, warum kann ich gar nicht sagen jetzt? I'm under the gun, but ja, es war toll, zusammen mit dir Bikepacking zu lernen, weil ich habe nie Bikepacking gemacht habe. Und das ist ein ganz neuer Chapter in meinem Leben.
It's great. I'm happy to show you. And please say one of those terms you learned.
The one that I've been trying to learn is where's my notes? Bahnhof, Landecke. I forgot. Okay, can I just say Staubsauger? I'm really proud of Staubsauger.
I think it's good.
The word of the day, which is the train platform, I seem to have forgotten it.
You mean Bahnsteigkante?
Yeah, Bahnsteigkarte. Yeah, thanks for reminding me. I flunked, so I'm going to disappear now. This is the end of the conversation because I have to go hit the books.
And that's the beauty of cycling, that we can ride together, we can learn from each other. I can learn about bike history, I can learn about Charlie and you can learn about Bahnsteigkante and bikepacking and all that stuff. And
I've been correcting your grammar too. That's been kind of nice.
And you've been correcting my grammar, and we are vulnerable enough to experience all that we experienced in the last days. And thank you for telling us something about you and Charlie and all the stuff you did and do. Thanks.
Das war jetzt wirklich ein ordentlicher Deep Dive, wie man so neudeutsch sagen würde. Gibt es so einen Moment, wo du jetzt auch so ein paar Tage später immer noch so sagst, oh krass, das fand ich extrem interessant, das habe ich in der Tiefe und in der Detailreiche gar nicht gewusst oder erkannt oder wahrgenommen?
Vielleicht 2 Sachen. Ich finde diese Liebesgeschichte sehr schön zwischen den beiden. Ich finde das schön, wie sie über ihn spricht und wie sie das beschreibt, auch in der Unterschiedlichkeit. Das ist das eine. Das zweite, was mir komplett neu war diese, ich nenne es mal familiäre Treibladung, also was sie ja auch ziemlich plastisch beschreibt und sagt, ich hoffe, alle, die das hören, sitzen gerade, dass also ihre Mutter den Vater versucht hat zu erschießen und er ist einfach nicht dran gestorben, und das hat sie auch so, während wir unterwegs waren, so sind wir da 1-2 Mal drauf gekommen, ne? Und das Fahrrad so als und das Rennenfahren als so eine Art Flucht, das wie so eine Treibladung funktioniert. So, das war ziemlich plastisch. Ich habe es jetzt viel schlechter beschrieben, als sie das gemacht hat in dem Gespräch. Das ist schon deutlich hängen geblieben für mich. Und der Mann ist im Pflegeheim. Es sind ungefähr 100.000 an Kosten, $100.000 im Jahr, die da anfallen. Und die sind natürlich ungedeckt. So, also es gibt da verschiedene Aktionen. Es gibt diese GoFundMe-Kampagne, die sie angesprochen hat. Und es gibt noch ein paar andere Aktionen jetzt auch, wenn sie hier ist. Und das ist schon so, wenn man in seiner Tragweite ist das schon bewegend, finde ich, das so zu hören. Ja.
Tatsächlich hatte ich auch auf der Eurobike, als wir uns kurz getroffen haben, also als ich Jacquie auch kurz gesehen hatte, hat sie das auch angesprochen im etwas größeren Kreis, dass das auch aus ihrer Sicht ja total tragisch ist und auch natürlich, ich meine, da mache ich jetzt ein ganz großes Fass noch auf, er eben auch Teil des amerikanischen Gesundheitssystems ist, also dass diese Kosten halt so hoch sind und dass man die halt privat trägt und das ist keine Krankenversicherung oder in der Form und so. Ja, das ist schon krass, wie sie damit auch ganz offen umgeht und so. Also das finde ich schon auch interessant. Habe ich mich dann auch gefragt. Aber auf der anderen Seite hat man auch gar keine andere Wahl. Aber ob jetzt eine Deutsche oder ein Deutscher das so sagen würde, hey, ich brauche 9.000 Euro im Monat Pflegekosten für meinen Mann. Und also das finde ich schon interessant. Also es ist dann am Ende auch erschreckend und aber irgendwie auch total offen und so. Also es
setzt so ein paar Dinge ins Verhältnis. Ich habe dann in anderen Gesprächen, die ich jetzt nicht aufgenommen habe, da noch ein paar mehr Sachen erfahren, ne? Dass es zum Beispiel verschiedene Sammler gibt, die Cunninghams jetzt alle haben, also die Räder. Sie haben wohl einen ziemlich guten Track davon, welches Rad wo ist. Da wissen sie ziemlich gut Bescheid. Und es gibt wohl einen, der hat einen Großteil der Räder, die Charlie noch hatte, wenn ich das richtig verstanden habe. Und der kommt monatlich für einen gewissen Anteil dieser Pflegekosten auf. Und die Werkstatt, ich war damals auch in der Werkstatt noch drin, die Werkstatt hat mich wahnsinnig beeindruckt. Ich glaube, ich habe damals hier auch davon erzählt. Die Werkstatt ist inzwischen natürlich auch nicht mehr so, weil erstens, wer soll da drin noch irgendwas machen? Zweitens, es wird dann halt alles irgendwie versucht, ein bisschen zu Geld zu machen, weil geht halt nicht anders. Und wie sie das auch anspricht, so das Haus will ich noch nicht verkaufen, weil mir kann es ja auch mal irgendwann so gehen, da muss ja auch noch irgendwas da sein für meine Pflege. Ist auch nur so eine Momentaufnahme, ne? In diesen, also wie du richtig sagst, da hängen ganz andere irgendwie große Themen dran. Ich kann es mal ganz praktisch noch umbiegen und ganz konkret in die Gegenwart holen. Mich haben ein paar Leute kontaktiert, wie das nun ist, was man machen kann, wie man helfen kann. Also ich habe so festgestellt, es gibt viele Leute, die können sie nicht so richtig einordnen. Ne? So Jacquie Phelan, der Name ist auch nicht allen geläufig. Und dann gibt es Leute, die wissen, wer das ist. Und bei denen ist die sind sofort da mit ganz viel Hilfsbereitschaft. Und ja, sie versucht irgendwie da so ein bisschen, kreativ irgendwie damit umzugehen und irgendwie auch ein bisschen Geld zu machen. Jacquie verkauft Patches. Neben dieser GoFundMe-Kampagne, die immer läuft. Aber sie verkauft Patches der Wombats, der Women's Mountainbike and Tea Society. Und die verkauft sie halt für einen gewissen Preis, also für so um die 20 €, um damit das auch zu finanzieren. Und das kann man auch sagen, hat sie ja auch erwähnt, sie wird bei der Single Speed World Championship in Aufenau sein, vom 16. bis 18. August. Und
also jetzt Mitte August, ja. 16. bis 18.
Genau,
ne?
Genau. Ja. Und dort wird man auch mindestens diese Patches kaufen können, um da zu supporten. Eventuell gibt es auch noch die eine oder andere Aktion mehr und Gelegenheit, überhaupt mit ihr zu sprechen und vielleicht noch ein bisschen näher da ans Thema irgendwie ranzukommen und vielleicht auch ein bisschen mehr Geld dazu lassen, wer das will, kann und möchte.
Also Mitte August hat man nochmal die Chance, sie tatsächlich in Europa persönlich zu treffen.
Genau, und
cool.
und ihre Bereitschaft, also das habe ich gemerkt, ihre Bereitschaft, Dinge zu bemalen.
Stimmt.
Die ist hoch.
Postkarten zum Beispiel, ja.
Stimmt, für dich hat sie eine Postkarte, bei einem Kumpel hat sie eine Rahmentasche bemalt und so, also die ist hoch und wenn jemand irgendwie Bock drauf hat, dann bringt er einfach irgendwie einen entsprechenden Stift mit, der passt dazu und dann wird es auch gemacht. So, ja. Und insgesamt einfach, halt super interessant an diese Geschichten dann zu hören, auch wenn die natürlich dann hier, das ist halt eine gewisse Tiefe, die damit einhergeht.
Waren das jetzt schon die 3 Punkte? Ich habe versucht mitzuzählen.
Das waren die 3 Punkte.
Ja, nee, ich habe jetzt tatsächlich den Überblick so ein bisschen verloren. Aber
waren es etwa mehr?
Nee, ich glaube schon, das waren die 3 Punkte. Beim letzten waren wir, glaube ich, jetzt ein bisschen länger.
Ja. Was ich interessant finde trotzdem, und das ist jetzt aber nicht einer von den 3 Punkten, aber ist so wir haben uns ja ein bisschen beschäftigt mit den Leuten, die diesen Trend Mountainbiking, und jetzt kann man natürlich darüber diskutieren, wie ist der mit dem ganzen Gravel-Kram und wie ist das alles verschränkt und was gab es da vorher mal im Parallel und irgendwie, aber dass es diese Gruppe an Leuten gibt und die dann unterschiedliche Wege gehen von Leuten, die irgendwie in diesem Bike-Business noch irgendeine Rolle spielen und sei es so wie Gary Fisher, wo Sissy sagt so, jede Eurobike irgendwie, ich renne jeden Tag einmal in Gary Fisher rein. Mhm. Ja, und das kennen sicher viele. Gary steht dann irgendwie da mit einem seiner lustigen Anzüge und macht so den Mann dann da.
Den Mountainbike-Mann, ja.
Genau. Zu so Leuten, die sich dann komplett rausgezogen haben, so Charlie Kelly, der hatte dann ja eine Piano Moving Company, also der hat einfach gemerkt, so, okay, Klaviere umziehen ist irgendwie,
auch ein guter Job.
Liegt mir besser und gibt vielleicht sogar mehr Geld. Zu so Leuten, wo dann Markenname irgendwie noch existent ist, wie Joe Breeze und dann halt auch so Leuten wie Tom Ritchie nicht zu vergessen, ne? Wo noch da einiges funktioniert. Und dann Leuten wie Jacquie und Charlie. Und Charlie hatte nun mal diesen tragischen Unfall. Und dann kommt man dann in diese Situation. Das finde ich ist einfach interessant zu sehen, wie so eine Entwicklung an einem gewissen Zeitpunkt im Leben startet. Und dann gibt es
fächert sich das so auf.
Das fächert sich auf und das ist teilweise, kann man im Nachhinein sagen, okay, das liegt daran, das liegt daran, das liegt daran und teilweise sind es einfach so beschissene Zufälle wie halt so ein Unfall und so eine Gehirnblutung und das ist, das ist dann schon, steckt dann auch noch drin, wenn man da noch weiter drüber reden will.
Ich find's irre. Ich muss sagen, danke, dass du im Rahmen dieses Podcasts mein Mountainbike-Geschichtswissen sowieso ungefähr quadrupliziert hast irgendwie und dass du jetzt auch nochmal nach der Eurobike dann dieses sehr, sehr spannende und hörenswerte Gespräch mit Jacquie geführt hast, weil ich glaube, jetzt gehe ich mal so weit, ich persönlich kenne jedenfalls niemanden, der sich so intensiv in Deutschland mit der Geschichte des Mountainbikesports und der Historie so auseinandergesetzt hat. Finde ich cool. Also finde ich wirklich auch einen echten Mehrwert für den Podcast.
Ja, sehr gern. Das ist ja auch für mich ein Mehrwert.
Ja.
Und dann hilft man sich so, man macht es halt gegenseitig.
Nee, finde ich.
Und dann.
Bereichernd.
Ja, vielen Dank, das habe ich gern gemacht. Ich fühle mich auch bereichert durch viele Gespräche. So, es wird noch weitere geben, auch natürlich in diesem Podcast wie immer. Und die nächsten Gespräche folgen am 9. August für die Menschen, die uns hier finanziell unterstützen über Steady und Apple Podcasts. Leider nicht die uns unterstützen und zusätzlich noch dafür sorgen, dass keine Hundebabys sterben und deswegen also per PayPal oder auf anderen Wegen Detektor als Mutterschiff unterstützen.
Dauerauftrag zum Beispiel. Ne? Aber tatsächlich ist es so, du hast es ganz richtig gesagt, ja, wo wir auch die Möglichkeit haben, über technische, digitale Mittel die Ausgabe schon ein bisschen früher zur Verfügung zu stellen. Das sind eben Steady und Apple Podcast, aber ich unterstreiche es auch nochmal, PayPal, Dauerüberweisung, Dauerauftrag, Einmalüberweisung, was auch immer, ist auch großartig. Alle Infos dazu findet ihr übrigens auf detektor.fm/danke, denn da ist es alles nochmal aufgelistet, wie man uns in welcher Art und Weise irgendwie auch empfehlen kann. Tatsächlich ist es, so doof es manchmal klingt, auch extrem hilfreich, wenn ihr es weitersagt. Also wenn ihr gern diesen Podcast hört und ihr habt eine Freundin oder einen Freund, wo ihr sagt, ey, der oder die ist auch total interessiert an Fahrradthemen, an Fahrradpolitik, an Fahrradkultur, an Mountainbike-Geschichte, an Rennradthemen, you name it. Empfehlt gerne diesen Podcast hier weiter, denn nur so können wir langfristig uns weiterentwickeln, noch neue Leute finden, mehr Podcasts machen, diesen Podcast hier besser machen und so. Also empfehlt uns gerne weiter, das hilft wirklich sehr. Beispielsweise auch mit Empfehlungen bei Apple Podcasts oder auch bei Spotify mit Sternen und so. Das ist kostenlos, aber nicht umsonst, um es mal so flapsig zu sagen.
Ich finde es gar nicht so flapsig. Ich finde, das hast du sehr schön gesagt. Genau. Außerdem gibt es ja auch so kleine Serien, da will man ja dranbleiben. Ich bin zum Beispiel schon ganz gespannt, was mit unserem kleinen Freund Krafti so passiert. Da könnte es nämlich in der nächsten Ausgabe was geben. Ihr erreicht uns auf den üblichen Wegen. Antritt@detektor.fm, Instagram, Facebook und natürlich bei Christian im Maschinenraum.
Bei Mastodon. So soll es sein. Dann kommt jetzt wirklich das ganz große kleine Finale. Du bist dran mit dem Song.
Und ich bin völlig durcheinander gekommen.
Du hast gedacht, du kannst einmal aussetzen, ne?
Oder nee, das nicht wirklich.
Du hast gedacht, du warst schon, oder
was?
Ich
bin durcheinander gekommen, weil...
Das ist die Sommerhitze.
Und das Vorproduzieren. Man muss dazu sagen, diese Ausgabe wird vorproduziert und dazwischen gab es noch die Eurobike-Ausgabe, wo wir Sissi mit ihrer Songauswahl dazwischen gelassen haben. Deswegen kann ich sagen...
Die Synapsen feiern Fasching ein bisschen. Ja.
Der Song, der jetzt laufen wird, der wird uns alle überraschen und mich inklusive.
Oh.
Denn ich kenne ihn noch nicht.
Das ist ja völlig verrückt. Dann hören wir ganz genau zu. Kommt gut in den August.
Das wünsche ich euch auch. Gute Fahrt. Ciao.
They sentenced me to 20 years of boredom for trying to change the system from within. I'm coming now, I'm coming to reward them. First, we take Manhattan. Then we take Berlin. I'm guided by a signal in the heavens. I'm guided by this birthmark on my skin. I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons. First, we take Manhattan. Then we take Berlin. Now you're worried that I just might win. You know the way to stop me, but you don't have the discipline. How many nights I prayed for this to let my work begin. First, we take Manhattan. Then we take Berlin. I don't like your fashion business, mister. And I don't like these drugs that keep you thin. I don't like what happened to my sister. First, we take Manhattan. Then we take Berlin. Thank you for those items that you sent me. The monkey and the plywood violin. I practiced every night. Now I'm ready. First, we take Manhattan. Then we take Berlin. Remember me, I used to live for music. Remember me, I brought your groceries in. Well, it's Father's Day and everybody's wounded. First, we take Manhattan. Then we take Berlin.